Watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the best way to experience the drastic transformation television had in the late 90s into what it is now. Shows would be standalone and have no real continuity between episodes, so you could watch at any point and perfectly understand what was happening. However, by the time the show ended 7 years later, television was almost like a long movie split over multiple weeks, with one big season-long act that kept you captivated every time you pressed play on the next episode. Undoubtedly, something that all viewers on the show can tell you, that Buffy is a completely different program from when it starts to when it ends. If you don't like the campy episodic first season, try the more serious and darker later seasons, which focus more on character arcs and plot twists, while still keeping the original feel of the show intact. Now, as much as we can talk about the mistakes and drawbacks of Joss Whedon and the constant reports of just how outrageous he could be towards actors and writers alike, there is no question that he's been at the helm of many of the most beloved projects of the past 25 years. Sitting down and watching the first season of Buffy isn't hard your first go around, but coming back to it once you've seen what the show has to offer from mid-season 2 onwards, it can be quite difficult to get through. A lot of the episodes are very mediocre and incredibly cheesy, resulting in something which comes across as not aging very well. Still, the excellent writing from the team is prevalent, and it's still funny and charming at points too. This is an episodic analysis of the first season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A two-part storyline kicks off the show, basically introducing us to all the characters and settings we'll be accustomed to throughout the season. One thing Buffy always planned to do was the unexpected, setting up potential villains in one scene to have them be dead in the next. It really keeps the viewer on their toes, unsure of what's going to happen next. Buffy's character is instantly likeable, constantly mocking others, and has a ton of self-confidence, which was a pretty smart thing for the show to do at its time. Originally, Buffy was a movie. It was released a few years earlier in 1992 and was more of an origin story with a completely different cast and characters aside from Buffy herself. The movie isn't canon, although the story did happen, we just don't see it. People who had seen the film had already seen an origin story to this character, albeit a completely different version, but nonetheless, this allows the show to just kick off and be its own thing from the get-go. We do see more of Buffy's origin in this canon with flashbacks later on, but right now, all you need to know is that she burned down a school gym, which got herself kicked out of her previous school. Her parents divorced and she now stays with her mother Joyce in the fictional town of Sunnydale, California. The supporting cast, Willow, Xander, Giles and Cordelia, all grow on you quite quickly, and the cast has instant chemistry. Buffy just wants to be left alone from slaying after she feels like she tore her parents apart, but Giles, her new watcher, who trains the Slayer, knows something is up, trying to convince her to return. Sunnydale is located on a Hellmouth, meaning demonic activity is constant, and sure enough, an ancient vampire named the Master is risen by Luke, Darla, and a number of other vampires that worship him, so they aim to free him from a mystical barrier placed upon him during an earthquake many years before. Our final character introduced is Angel, who isn't actually named until the second episode, but you can instantly tell he has something to hide. It's quite interesting how they portray him in these first two episodes. He's more snarky and back-talking than the Angel we see for the remainder of his time on Buffy. It's quite striking on a rewatch. Willow and Jessie, or Jessie being one of Xander's friends, are kidnapped, and while Buffy saves them, narrowly escaping herself, Jessie gets taken behind her back. He acts as bait when Buffy and Xander aim to rescue him, revealing that he's already a vampire. It was such an interesting choice to make Jessie out to be a main character before immediately killing him off and making him a vampire in the first episode. Originally, Whedon wanted Eric Balfour to appear in the opening credits for the show for these two episodes, so just that the last thing the audience expected was for him to be killed off so quickly. This is an idea that they would revisit later on again in the spin-off Angel, which we'll talk about when we get to. We're really getting ahead of ourselves there, but that one was less intentional. The harvest is the ritual which the Master wants to use to free himself, although when Luke tries to get things going at the Bronze Club, Buffy and the gang save the day, staking Luke, Jessie accidentally staking himself, and Darla running out with holy water burning her skin, although she doesn't die like the other two and will return later on. This is a strong opening for the show, and feels actually more like a Season 2 or 3 story than what we'll see for the rest of Season 1. All in all, not too shabby of an opener. The remainder of Season 1 up until its mid-season and season finale features the same formula. A throwaway character is introduced who either creates or helps the gang in the episode's issue. For this episode, it's Amy the Witch. The cheerleading squad is what's hot and every girl seemingly wants to be in it, that is, until they keep getting sidelined so that alternatives can be swapped in their place. Buffy herself is even targeted, and then they suspect Amy. The twist is, it actually turns out to be Amy's mother, who's swapped the two's bodies so that she can relive her glory days as a cheerleader. The two are swapped back and Amy's mum is dealt with easily, rounding out the episode. Now, this feels more like Season 1 Buffy to me, with its sometimes flimsy writing as the show's just still trying to figure out what it wants to be. Joss Whedon wrote the two-part opener, but the remainder of the season for the most part, apart from the finale, is written by others. This is the only episode in the whole show to be written by Dana Reston, and it's clear that the humour of the show is also still being worked on, with a few jokes just completely missing the mark. I've seen worse, some of which we'll be talking about very soon, and Amy is actually one of the few throwaway Season 1 characters who returns throughout the show. David Greenwalt's first episode, who would actually be a writer and producer throughout the entire run of the show and also on the spin-off Angel, and wow, this is incredibly mediocre. After Buffy's teacher George Bush is killed mysteriously after school hours, a substitute arrives and instantly captivates Xander and the throwaway character Blaine. It's clear through her obsession with insects and head-turning that she's the villain. And sure enough, after luring Xander back to her house, she is revealed to be a praying mantis. This is one of the more ridiculous twists in the show, and I just don't like it. There's a whole other storyline about a demon with a claw that just disappears and nothing comes of it. The ending, where there are more eggs revealed to be hatching into more baby mantises, believe it or not, this was not followed up upon. I guess they dealt with it off screen, thank God. Greenwalt's writing improves as the show goes on, thankfully, but for a first episode, it's quite poor. This is one I never hear talked about during discussions about the first season. A lot of people tend to just forget about it altogether or find it rather boring. In my opinion, this is one of the more stronger episodes, written by Rob Des Hotel and Dean Vitale, a writing duo who would work on the show for the first 2 seasons. They wrote this, and I can safely say there are no praying mantises in sight here. Instead, Buffy grows a crush on throwaway Owen, who's really mysterious and quiet, which eventually gains the attention of Cordelia, who also makes moves for him. On Buffy and Owen's date night, Giles discovers a prophecy of an anointed one, resulting in 5 deaths and the rise of an individual who will help the Master be free. Despite Giles' best efforts, they don't stop it from happening, and 5 deaths occur. The suspected anointed one is taken to the Sunnydale funeral home, and since Buffy is distracted by Owen, Giles goes alone, getting himself trapped. Xander and Willow manage to grab Buffy in time with awkward words of encouragement by Angel, and they head to rescue Giles. Owen follows, unaware that vampires exist and that he's probably not very safe. While Buffy and Giles search for the body of the anointed one, Owen finds it himself in the display room, where it awakens and attacks him. Buffy eventually tosses it into an oven and the day is saved, although Owen does seem pretty shaken up by it all. He even talks to Buffy the next day and says that he found it so exhilarating he would love to do it again. Buffy then cuts ties, knowing that Owen will end up just getting himself killed, and Giles attempts to comfort her with some wise words, rounding out the episode. I like this one. Buffy learns something at the end about being the Slayer, and that it's nearly impossible to keep a social life and slaying separate. No twists or turns. The end. Oh, also the vampire they killed wasn't the anointed one, it was actually a little boy that was also around when the deaths happened. So, okay, the episode is almost pointless when that's revealed, but look, I can't help it, this is one of the stronger stories here, and the throwaway character isn't actually a dick for once. He's just a quiet guy who finally got a bit of excitement in his life. I understand why we never see him again, he wasn't that interesting, but I digress. And we're back to mediocre. Matt Keane and Joe Rehnquist wrote this one, and they have a knack for writing kind of stupid storylines, or 2 of them anyway. Yeah, they went around long on the show, and episodes like this, you can see why. Xander and the throwaway bully characters are possessed by hyenas while on a school field trip to the zoo. This makes them act like hyenas. They laugh and act like dicks, making Xander a creepy, unlikable character for the sake of comedy, although some people would argue that that's the case anyway. There's a scene where he tries to have his way with Buffy and even pushes her against the wall. She's the Slayer. Why isn't she just pushing dumbass dorky Xander off of her? He's not got any strength that she can't clearly outmatch. There's a scene where Xander and the bullies eat the school mascot, which is a pig, and it causes Principal Flutie to go insane at the bullies, and their response is to eat him. I don't have an awful lot to say about Principal Flutie. He only lasts these 6 episodes, but yeah, he seemed like a kind soul, not cut out for the job of principal on a Hellmouth. That is when he's not annoying Ross on Friends.
It's a pity I'm allergic to shellfish.
So where did you get your undergraduate degree?
And that's not all I'm allergic to.
Oh, it's not over.
Surprise, surprise, the zookeeper's actually the villain and turns on the gang after promising to turn the kids back to normal, absorbing all the hyena power for himself, until Buffy eventually pushes him over into the hyena enclosure, ending him quickly. The bullies are never seen again, and neither is this episode now that I've watched it. This is one I will not be revisiting for just how dumb it is. What happens to the hyenas? Do they possess anyone else after this? Are they sent back to where they came from? Also, who runs the zoo now to do that? This one's another half-decent episode, written by David Greenwalt, who's now gotten over his praying mantis phase, to bring us a solid story. It breaks the usual formula to focus more on the character of Angel, hence the name. As Buffy grows more romantically interested in him, eventually leading him up to her room to sleep one night, he's revealed to be a vampire. This confuses literally everyone, as he's been helping Buffy the whole time. It's where we find out more about Angel's history, and that he was once a vicious vampire, one of the most vicious to ever live. That was until he killed a gypsy whose clan cursed him with his soul back. He spent 100 years trying to come to terms with the acts he's done while trying to adjust in a world where he is neither a vampire nor a human. Darla returns for this episode, who is actually the one who sired Angel 240 years earlier. She visits Buffy's mum while Buffy is out, attacking her, and frames Angel. Buffy, who is actually starting to fall for Angel, she now has to deal with the fact she has to kill him. She tracks him down to the Bronze, where Darla attempts to shoot them. She just straight up has guns and shoots at Buffy. I don't remember if this ever happens again in the series. It seems very mid-90s, so I imagine not. Buffy meets him at the Bronze the next night, and the two kiss, parting ways. Spoiler alert, Angel isn't gone even though they say goodbye here. The episode's good. Feels more like season 2, showing the direction they wanted to take, a more serious one, which this next episode tries to do before completely failing in its third act. Often cited as one of the worst episodes of the show, is written by Ashley Gable and Thomas A. Swiden, who only wrote 2 episodes of the show's first season, this being the first. A group of monks capture a hypnotising demon within a book named Moloch, and if the book was ever to be read again, it would unleash the demon. This book eventually finds its way into the school library during a scanning of the collection, and the throwaway character Miss Calendar, the computing science teacher, is helping out with 2 other students, immediately clashing heads with Giles' ideals about being anti-technology. Willow scans the book into the computer, which unleashes Moloch into the internet. I love that premise, a demon in the internet, and to be fair, the show wanted to try and achieve a more darker tone, which it actually does successfully at portions in this episode. Willow begins chatting online to an unknown guy named Malcolm, which eventually starts to make her act unlike herself. Through investigation, Buffy is targeted by the 2 students who are under Moloch's spell. Dave, one of the 2 students, eventually comes to his senses, which includes a rather sinister scene where he watches his own suicide note being typed out in front of him by Moloch, and yes, Dave is killed. Not turned into a vampire and then staked, no. This little boy is hung in a school classroom. Miss Calendar reveals herself to be a techno-pagan, whatever the fuck that is, helping Giles discover more about how to trap the demon again. Meanwhile, the episode enters its third act, which completely ruins any dark tones that it had been building up with one fell swoop. Every time I see this stupid robot, I'm immediately reminded of just how dated this first season is. Buffy and Xander save Willow, who's been kidnapped by Moloch, now revealed to be Malcolm, but to be honest, that wasn't very much a surprise. Giles and Miss Calendar bind Moloch through the internet, but he isn't in the book. Instead, he's bound to the robot body, which Buffy manages to destroy, killing Moloch. Okay, this is all fine and dandy, but we never see Moloch again, meaning that once the object he was bound to was destroyed, it killed him forever, which begs the question, why didn't the monks just destroy the book? He was in it. Burn it and he dies. An unbelievably rubbish third act stops this one from being remotely liked by fans, but to be honest, it's not too bad at points. However, every time I do see that robot crash through the plastic wall, I want to kill myself. Desvitel and Battaglia return to write this surprisingly good episode given its silly story. The school talent show is happening and Giles is appointed by the new principal Snyder to head the performance. The throwaway Morgan is entering as a ventriloquist, which his act eventually takes a rather unusual turn.
I didn't sleep at all last night.
All right. Kid, you are the worst. Even I can see your lips move.
A girl is then killed in the locker room, sorry to bring it down, and her heart was cut out, the gang believing it to be something ritual. As they investigate, all signs point to Morgan, and Buffy catches him seemingly talking to himself. The dummy Sid tells Morgan that Buffy is the one and that he has to kill her. When Morgan declines, Sid does it himself, completely freaking her out during the night. After a sinister classroom scene, Sid is confiscated by a teacher, which gives Xander enough time to steal it so that Buffy can talk to Morgan on her own, as he's a prime suspect. Only problem is, he's dead, and his brain's missing. Sid suddenly attacks Buffy, who isn't actually evil. Sid was a demon hunter in the 1920s who was cursed to live as a dummy by demons. He has to kill all of them in order to be at peace, and because Buffy was so strong, he believed she was the demon. No one from the talent show is missing, meaning that the culprit is still unknown. Although the new principal is hanging around sketchily, maybe he's the villain. Or he isn't, subverting our expectations again. Instead it's the magician, who was seen failing at his act multiple times throughout the episode. And he's dealt with, nearly killing Giles in the process, and this puts Sid the dummy to rest. Now despite how utterly dumb all of that sounds, This episode actually does a good job of remaining entertaining. It's constantly keeping you guessing about what's going on. Before we know Sid is actually alive, we see Morgan clutching at his head as if he's imagining the voice that he's created, although he just has brain cancer. You know, no biggie, that's revealed for some reason. It's fine, I like it. It's flawed, but I like it. Evil ventriloquist dummies could have been such a really simple route to go down, but the show took it one step further and made the dummy a good guy in the end, which is worth something, I guess. Even after multiple rewatches of this episode, I still don't really know how to feel about it. For one, the story was by Joss Whedon, although David Greenwalt wrote the script itself, making what I feel is a bit of a mess. The whole idea of people's nightmares coming true is interesting, not entirely original, but it's fun to see Xander running from clowns and Buffy's surprise test being over in 2 minutes. However, the actual story itself is so downright confusing it takes away from the overall experience. A little boy named Billy was put into a coma by his baseball coach after he failed to catch the ball which lost him the game. Okay, first off... You know what, never mind, let me finish. Despite the coma, he still appears to Buffy, running from a monster that's supposed to be modelled after the baseball coach. This also causes everyone else's nightmares to come true, for some reason, although it's never explained if Billy's nightmare is actually the baseball coach, or if this is just happened once, and it's caused all of this. Oh, and the corny ending of him facing his fear, and then they all stand up to their baseball coach as he appears conveniently right as Billy wakes up. I mean, the thing stopping this episode from failing completely is the dialogue, as Greenwalt knows what he's doing in that department, but I think there must have been a miscommunication with the story to script here, because this episode fails in the story department quite severely. Had Whedon wrote the episode himself, maybe there would have been something worth salvaging here, or maybe he didn't particularly feel bothered and passed it to Greenwalt, who had to do his best. I mean, when Billy wakes up, which restores the world to the way it was, the gang all remembers it happening. Even Buffy, Willow and Xander are talking about it the next day, but yet everyone else seems to be going about their business. Literally 2 seconds after everything is put back, these people walk right past the doorway like nothing happened. Why did the gang remember it but not everyone else? Well, guess what? Never explained. Now this is an adaptation done right. The story by Joss Whedon was scripted by Ashley Gable and Thomas A. Swiden for their second and final episode, following I, Robot Eugene, and wow, it is so evident that they didn't come up with a story. The school is terrorised by an invisible girl who seems like she's targeting Cordelia, who's currently running for May Queen. Through research, the gang figures out it's a girl named Marcy who was ignored so much that she turned invisible. As season 1 as this story is, they do some legitimately interesting things here. It's the first time we see Cordelia as a human being, opening up to Buffy about how she doesn't actually like being popular, she just does it to fit in and have friends, which that gives her character so much more room to grow after this, which it does very much so in the next few seasons. It's also one of the only instances where we see the FBI get involved, in the end recruiting Marcy to join an assassination program at their facilities, which I think is a funny and unique way to have the episode end. However, I can't help but feel like we could have seen more of these guys, the FBI agents. They even give them names and they're seen throughout the episode hanging around, but following their shady interaction with Buffy at the Bronze at the end, we never see them again. I think they must have originally wanted to make them a bigger part of the show, which I think would have been interesting to have them, sniffing around a Hellmouth with all the suspicious activity, but oh well. It's also one of the first times in the show that a completely unrelated event happens that has a knock-on effect in the next episode. Angel returns and offers to get Giles an ancient book about Slayer prophecies, which was thought to have been lost. How does Angel know where this book is? Where was it? We don't know, but he returns pretty swiftly and saves Giles, Willow and Xander from getting gassed by Marcy. It's this book that Giles reads which kicks off the season finale, and despite the fact the show would become no stranger to season-long arcs in its future seasons, it's fun to see here. By far the best episode of the entire season is this finale. Every single development that had been happening over the previous 11 episodes finally pays off. Buffy is currently having a great time with her life, and as prom approaches, Xander finally works up the courage to ask her to go. See, I haven't mentioned it yet, but Xander has had a crush on Buffy. It's talked about once or twice every few episodes, and he just keeps trying to work up the nerve to ask her out. But to keep the triangle more interesting, Willow has feelings for Xander, which he clearly doesn't reciprocate. However, this love triangle angle that they try to pull sort of disappears in the second season, which I'm glad. There was no need to make all these characters in love with each other and all that rubbish, which they got over. Buffy rejects Xander's romantic moves, wanting to remain friends, and he storms off. Meanwhile, Giles has been reading that book of Slayer prophecies that Angel gave him last episode and discovers a prophecy that in the coming days, Buffy will fight the Master and die. No ifs, ands or buts given, Buffy is to die. Giles goes into complete lockdown mode trying to find any way to disprove it before telling Buffy that she is about to die, which is something that they would try again later on in the spin-off Angel in far more detail, which I'm mentioning the spin-off so much in this first season, I'm so sorry, but in this it's over in 10 minutes. Giles meets with Angel talking about his concerns of Buffy's death, which Buffy overhears and breaks down. This is the part where the show gets serious. I mean, we've had killer ventriloquist dummies and praying mantis substitute teachers, but now Buffy's going to die before her life's even begun, and she reacts in the way you'd expect her to. It's the first time a proper life-threatening world-ending situation has come Buffy's way, and she panics completely. She just outright refuses to fight the Master, figuring that that will stop the prophecy from ever happening. Meanwhile, Jenny Calendar returns from episode 8 and tells Giles she's been receiving emails about an anointed one who's helping the Master. Yeah, remember the little boy from 7 episodes or so ago? Well, now they find out that the anointed one isn't dead and it's actually him. Buffy tries to beg her mum to leave for the weekend so that she can get as far away as possible, but Joyce simply tells her to go to the prom and enjoy herself. The next day, Cordelia and Willow find the Audio-Visual Club completely slaughtered in the rec room. I mean, if this isn't a sign of the show changing directions, I don't know what is. In fact, Willow ends up sitting out for a while, completely mortified by the deaths of the students, and rightfully so. It's only human for her to react this way instead of just shrugging it off without a second thought. Buffy takes this as a sign to not run away and avenge the death of the kids, meeting Giles and Jenny. Giles is preparing to take on the Master himself in Buffy's place to protect her, but she knocks him out when he refuses to listen to reason, and then she heads to the Master's Lair herself. While Buffy follows the Anointed One, Xander and Willow find out about her taking off, and Xander goes to find Angel, who will be able to track her scent. Meanwhile, Willow and Jenny set off for the Bronze, theorising that the Hellmouth will open there. However, when vampires begin to surround them, it's evident that the Hellmouth is in fact underneath the library. Buffy attempts to kill the Master, who hypnotises her with magic, taking a bite into her. This causes her to pass out and fall into a small body of water, unconscious. The Master, now having enough power to rise, now that he's drunk from a Slayer, does so. Xander and Angel run to Buffy after eventually finding her, but
she's dead.
Yeah. Now you think that they would go with some corny, "Oh, she's so strong, she defies prophecies" nonsense, but Buffy dies. Luckily, administering CPR on her, Xander revives her, and she awakens after taking a few minutes to adjust. The Master opens the Hellmouth with weird tentacle creatures appearing out of it, almost taking Willow and Jenny into the mouth itself. As the Master watches on, Buffy appears and tricks him, resisting his hypnosis. Not sure how that works exactly, but okay. She tosses him down onto a broken wooden table, staking him, leaving only a skeleton behind. I'm not sure why every other vampire turns to dust, but the Master skeleton remains behind. I don't know, anyway, his skeleton still exists for a reason, for an episode we'll see in the next season, but I can't work out why exactly. They all walk off to head for the Bronze, ready to party at the prom, and end scene. Joss Whedon wrote and directed this finale, and it truly shows the potential the series, the characters, and the lore had before it ever really peaked. In fact, some fans recommend that you skip the entire first season aside from the finale because of how different it is. I personally recommend not skipping any episodes, even on rewatches, but I would say watch the 2-part opener, then episode 7 Angel, and then the finale. Everything in between is the show still trying to figure out if it wants to go X-Files or not, which it kinda keeps around but never as extensive as in the first season. I've always been fascinated by a show's first season, as it needs to end the show in its finale, albeit not a fascinating way, but still, in case of cancellation, a show must end at the conclusion of its first season. Only after that can it go into cliffhangers and whatnot, in my opinion. And Buffy the show effectively ends 3 times because of this, although only technically. We'll go into that more when we get to it, but as a 12-episode mid-90s sci-fi show set in high school, it's solid. Sure, it's spoiled by time and how outdated it looks and feels, and because of the fact that the show gets so much better in the next few seasons in comparison to this. However, I do still find mindless enjoyment out of stuff like The Puppet Show, and Out of Mind, Out of Sight try some interesting things too. Is this the weakest season of the show? In my opinion, yes. Does that make it bad television? Not at all. But these 12 episodes will soon turn into 22, and season-long arcs will be constant as the show enters what I consider to be its golden age in the following couple of years. If you've watched this video and you still aren't sold, like I said, watch the 2-part opener, then Angel, then the finale, and learn more about the characters, because Buffy is a character-driven show. It's about how the characters react to what's going on around them and develop because of it. Moving into the second season and its excellent narrative in comparison, is a reward for your troubles of watching through this if you didn't like it. Speaking of which, I need to start work on that, so I'll be heading off now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.